Are you tired of hearing about mental health from a superficial view and want to hear about realistic views? Well, you've come to the right place. A space where healing is central but also normalized. Join hosts Danica and Myra as we engage in topics around mental health and keep it real while also giving you the work. Welcome to Black Women Healing Podcast. Hey y'all, so we have a very special guest today, but as usual, before we hop in, I want us to engage in a random conversation. So, Danica, if you could think of a food that you did not think you would enjoy, that you've tried and you actually do enjoy, what is that food? Your face.
Because I always tell people I try anything at least once.
Mm-hmm.
Probably alligator. Yeah, when I was in New Orleans, anything you eat in New Orleans seems to be good. So I had alligator. I had it fried, and I had it, I think, like sauteed or baked or something, and both ways were good. And you'd be like, I'm scared. I don't know the texture, but no, I like it. Yeah. What about you? Because I know you travel, you explore. So what about you?
Yeah, I love alligator. I've tried escargot, and at first I was like, I don't think I'm gonna like this, but I just closed my eyes and ate it, and it was really good. I was really shocked. So I would eat that again and again and again. It was really good. Dr. Angela, what about you?
Oh, goodness. My grandfather used to make something called fish eye stew. Yes, and since I was a kid, but whenever in terms of alligator and those kinds of things, we don't have that around here. And when we do, it sells out very quickly. But gosh, I don't know that I've eaten anything that's. I don't know that there isn't anything that I haven't at least tried.
Today's guest is Angela Neal Barnett, PhD, who is a professor of psychological services at Kent State University, where she directs the program for research on anxiety disorders among African Americans. She is the first Black woman promoted to full professor in the College of Arts and Sciences. Dr. Angela also serves as VP of Healthy Corporations, Companies, and Communities for A3B LLC. Dr. Angela's research focuses on the anxiety of the acting white accusation and culturally competent anxiety and trauma interventions for Black women across the lifespan. Her work appears in high-impact academic journals, including the Harvard Business Review, and she is frequently quoted in the national media. Self and Essence magazine named her book, Soothe Your Nerves, The Black Woman's Guide to Understanding and Overcoming Anxiety, Panic, and Fear, as a book to help during these turbulent times. Be sure to follow her on Twitter at Dr. Angela or LinkedIn, Dr. Angela Neal Barnett. So I'm super excited to have Dr. Angela today. As I read from her bio, she's amazing. And, when I was like in the 3rd or 4th grade, my mom bought your book. So it's always been around my house. So I was like randomly trying to find books for my clients. And I was like, wait, my mom, and she's never read the book. She's always had it. And I've always been like, what is that book about? So when I saw it on Amazon, I was Googling books for my clients. I was like, let me buy this. And it's crazy because she has to read this book because so many of the experiences that the women have in the book are the way my mom talks about her life. So now I'm like, when I see her again, I'm gonna be like, Mom, remember you had this book? I actually met this lady and we talked about it. So you need to go ahead and read it. So I'm really thankful that I was exposed to your book, even though it was just me seeing it at a young age, because now things have come full circle where I'm reading it now and it's applicable to the people that I know. So I'm gonna thank you for your work first off.
Okay.
And in your book, you share about various women that you came across, and I love how you have all these different stories. So I'm curious about your thoughts on why you felt like it was important to go about your writing in that way, to share these different stories of these different women.
So first of all, I want to say that how excited I am about the generational passing down of Soothe Your Nerves, because that's one of the reasons that I wrote it. And I included all these different types of women, and many who I had known growing up, or some who had been people that I worked with, because one of the things that we continually heard, and we still hear in the research to some extent, is that Black women get this, that many Black women think that anxiety is a white women's disease. And so I wanted to really show that Black women get this, and that two, that Black women who get this aren't crazy. They're just anxious. And so there's a variety of women, from my Aunt Pooh, who people always ask me about, to professional women, to students. I mean, anxiety runs the gamut across the lifespan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's super important how you're bringing up the fact that, like it being like this, thought of this white woman's disorder. And it just reminds me of like growing up, like I've never heard the word anxiety ever out of anybody's mouth in my family. Of like, I never heard people say like, oh, I'm anxious.
Yeah,
You just, that terminology just was just not there, right?
right. It's just not there. At best your nerves are bad.
Right. That is exactly what you hear. Me being from Kentucky, that's actually what you hear a lot. That's the one, you're making my nerves bad. That's what you hear. So that is true. But just going into like, us understanding even more, can you define for us a panic attack versus an anxiety attack? Because you hear about those a lot
Yeah,
interchangeably, but we
yeah.
want to make sure we talk about it.
Well, um, for a long time, when people say an anxiety attack, I would say, well, you can't have an anxiety attack. You're having a panic. You're having a panic attack, and it's panic attacks that are the diagnoses. So the term anxiety attack is not a diagnosis. However, what we are seeing, particularly in the last couple of years, are people having anxiety attacks as well as panic attacks. So let's talk about panic first, and then we'll talk about anxiety. So panic attacks come in three ways. All of a sudden, out of the blue, for no reason at all, you just get really, really scared. Okay, so there's fear. And what happens then is that, you might go from cold to hot, hot to cold. You might start shaking and trembling. Your arms or your legs might feel numb. You feel like you're going crazy. You feel like you're going to die. Your heart it feels like it's going to come out of your chest. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so fear is the emotion out of the blue that comes with panic attacks. So that's the first way you have a panic attack. The second way you have a panic attack is in the presence of something that you're afraid of. So you might have somebody who's afraid of heights or afraid of bridges, and they get to the bridge and they have this panic attack, okay, and the same symptoms, but it's fear. The third way, and this is particularly true for Black folks, is something called isolated sleep paralysis. That's the big psychological term, because psychologists like big words. Uh, but what you may have heard it, particularly if you have relatives who were raised in the South, you may hear them call it witch riding, or that a haint got a hold of me last night. Okay. And so with these isolated sleep paralysis type of panic attacks, just as you're falling asleep or just as you're waking up, you feel as if you can't move. And then you start, having these seeing things, and all of a sudden you get really scared. And of course, all the symptoms that we talked about. What's important to understand is that for Black Americans, isolated sleep paralysis tends to be recurrent. So the term is isolated, so it means it happens once. But for Black folks, it tends to happen over and over again. And what we also know is that most panic attacks occur at night. So you've got this form of panic that is recurring in Black men, Black women. So out of the blue, in the presence of something that you are afraid of, and then witch riding. Okay, so that's panic. Okay, anxiety attacks. Okay, involve something a little bit different. Okay, anxiety is this perception of a future threat. You just know something's going to happen. You don't know when and you don't know where, but you know it's going to happen. And so, what you get with people who have anxiety attacks is they are worrying. Okay, they think something's going to happen. There's this worry that goes along with it. And they worry themselves so much that they start to have the physical symptoms of a panic attack. So it's the anxiety and the panic occurring together. So that's the difference between a panic attack and an anxiety attack.
Thank you so much, Dr. Angela. The way you just explained that is so like understandable. Like it
Thank
makes
you.
so much sense. And I think that a lot of people, including myself, just listening to you, this is me as a, a licensed marriage and family therapist. That's a great way to explain it though, because it can be very confusing. People will be like, I'm having an anxiety attack, or I'm having a panic attack, but really, right, it's not a panic attack.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't last all day if it's a panic attack, right? Because I think that's what people get confused of. So thank you for breaking that down. Also, just anxiety in general, we talk about it in a lot of different ways. So, when people say they're anxious, I always say, what does that mean for you, right?
Right.
Uh, and so in your life, right, have you noticed common symptoms or behaviors that Black women typically report as their anxiety? If that does that make sense?
That does make sense. It makes a great deal of sense. So let me start uh, by saying probably the most common form of anxiety that we hear about in our work is social anxiety. And the social anxiety is, what must other people think? Uh, and so people with social anxiety have this fear of negative evaluation, but they also can have a fear of being evaluated positively. So why is social anxiety so common among Black women? Well, a couple of reasons. One, okay, oftentimes Black women are an only. They are the only one in their department. They're the only one in their graduate school program. They're the only one who works at this location in their building or at this location of wherever they work. And so when you are an only, there's a spotlight on you. And to some extent, people are evaluating you. And what happens for many Black women is at first they're doing really well, and then they go from office pet to office threat. And that creates this social anxiety. I have to be twice as good to go half as far. And so they're in the state of highest alert, trying to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and no one is perfect. And that and so that can create social anxiety. That can trigger social anxiety. The other thing that we have found, and we have people in PRADA, which is my research lab, which stands for Program for Research on Anxiety Disorders Among African Americans, who are doing this research, and they find that this accusation that one is not Black enough or that one is acting white is also a trigger for social anxiety. And the reason that it's a trigger is because the acting white accusation is an attack against the core of who one is. So it's an attack against one's racial identity. And that you don't even, again, you don't find Black women who want to be white women. Okay, it's just how they define what it means to be Black is different than people who might be around them. So it's like there's this continuum, you know, of what it means to be Black. And again, your definition may not match my definition, but that doesn't mean that I'm acting white. So that's another trigger for social anxiety in Black women. So what we see a high incidence of is social anxiety in Black women. Fears, phobias tend to be high in Black women. And with those phobias, again, come these panic attacks.
Thank you for breaking that down for us. I feel like I'm taking it so much.
I know you guys are listening. I know you're listening. So it's okay that you don't have anything to ask, because what I see is that you're listening intently, and I can see the wheels turning because you're thinking about your own clients or people in your own life, and you're thinking, wow, she just described client X, or oh my God, she just described Aunt so-and-so. So, or cousin somebody.
Yeah. You're making me think about my own experience at my job, because my job mysteriously found out like about this podcast, and then they learned about other stuff that I do. And I remember them like asking me like, why didn't you tell us? And I was like, I don't want the spotlight on me. But then now it's like this weird, I don't know if I want to tell you that much, because I don't know how you're going to look at me. Like, it's just, I don't know. So I've been like battling, like, how do I manage that? Because I don't really want to say it, but then I feel like I should. I don't know. So it's just making me like reflect on like my own life of how does it show up for me in settings. So I'm thinking about even like team meetings where I don't say anything because I'm like, I don't want you all like to be looking at me. So instead, like my heart's like racing, like, please don't call on me to say anything.
No, you are not alone. That's the first thing I want to say. You are not alone. Uh, Black women across the country are reporting this, are experiencing this. And again, we've been in a dual pandemic world. So the fact that you and I said Danica are doing this podcast together, and it's about empowering Black women, and and people, how do people hear the word empower? Are you inciting Black women to riot? I mean, those kinds of things. And then you have the X in the title. So and so people are thinking, so what does this X mean? And again, what we have to understand is that as Black women, we are always going to be too much for somebody. And the fact is, as Black women, particularly if we are operating in a white world, people are always going to talk about us. Mm-hmm. So we have to be able to internalize and say two little words. So what? Mm-hmm. And if we can say that, so what? And we can answer that question, and we can ask ourselves, so what again? What we eventually get to is, what is the core of our anxiety? What is it that we really think is going to happen? And that we can work with.
So what? Okay. I'm going to think about that more. In your book, towards the end, you talk about these Soothe Your Nerve sister circles. Mm-hmm. I was really drawn to that. I'm like, can I take this and create this? Like, I want to learn more about it. And I feel like it's important to share with our audience a little bit about it. If you can tell them a little bit about like what it is and how they can maybe find one or start one. Can you do that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. We've actually done a great deal of research on the Soothe Your Nerve sister circles, and we now call them SOS, sister circles. Uh, and we have run them, we have developed them across the lifespan, and we've done research on them across the lifespan. So we know that they work. People, um, lots of Black women. So what happens is that lots of Black women, um, and it's changing, so don't want to go to therapy. They don't want to go to a therapist, okay? Or they don't trust a therapist. And that's changing somewhat because there's all sorts of people who are demystifying therapy for us. But there's still this group, there's still a large group who do not want to see a therapist. And so in the SOS sister circles, we train uh, people to lead the sister circle. So similar to what you guys were doing on the campus, you have that circle in the class. So we train women in corporations. We train doulas to lead them for pregnant women. We train sorority sisters to lead them for their sorority. So there's this training that we give them to lead a 5-session SOS circle. And each session is manualized. So there's particular things that one is doing in each session. And some of those are in the book, and some of those we have expanded. And by the end of the circle, by the 5th session, everyone has developed a tool to cope with anxiety, to manage their anxiety, and people actually see their anxiety lowering. And when I say everyone, I'm including the facilitators. Running the SOS Sister Circle changes the facilitators for the better. And what happens after that is some people continue the circle, they continue meeting. And other people say, you know what? From this circle, I know that I can benefit from therapy. So so then we get people who we then refer to therapists because now they are ready, because they understand how therapy works. They understand, and the gold standard for treating anxiety is cognitive behavioral therapy. They understand how cognitive behavioral therapy works, and they see how it can improve their lives.
Wow, I'm so inspired by the work that you're doing behind this. Because when I was reading about it in the book, I had to read it twice. I was like, "What? I have never heard of this. This needs to be everywhere." Is there a website that people can go on to find more
Sure.
about it?
You can contact us via our Kent State website. So if you just go on, I am a member of the Kent State Department of Psychological Sciences. You click on my face, it'll take you to the website, and there'll be all sorts of information about SOS.
Okay, nice. I'll share the link with y'all in our description so y'all be able to find it.
Okay.
So, as we're talking about this shift for mental health and a lot of people seeking it out more, more Black women have sought out therapists who look like them. But for those who still may be struggling to seek out help, like we're kind of talking about, what is something you might say to them, whether it be a word of advice, or just your thoughts about that? What is something you might say to those who are still a little reluctant?
Advice for people who are struggling with anxiety, or advice for people just about going to therapy?
I want to say a mix of both. Maybe for a woman who is struggling with anxiety, but is kind of weary about going to therapy, and they maybe are weary about the sister circle too. What might you say?
Okay, so the first thing I would say is anxiety is treatable. You can reclaim your life. What we find over and over again is that people didn't know what they were experiencing had a name. They didn't know it was called social anxiety. They didn't know it was called panic attacks. They didn't know that it was phobias. So just so but it has a name. It is treatable, and you are not alone. When you are experiencing an anxiety disorder, particularly as Black women, you think you are the only one. And I'm sure you've had numerous guests on talking about the strong Black woman image. And so to be this strong Black woman, here's how you have to do, and you can't admit that you don't have it together. But anxiety makes you not have it together. So that's the first thing. It's treatable, and you can reclaim your life. Second, okay, if you are looking for a therapist, you should treat finding a therapist the same way you treat finding a hairdresser. Okay, that's what I tell people.
Ooh.
So, okay, now I used to live in Chicago, and there was a salon that opened up in the bottom of my building. So I thought, oh, salon, and I just go right down. I went down, I looked around, and I said, can you do black hair? And they said, oh, well, we can do black hair. So I said, great, okay. They could not do black hair. Okay, they could not do black hair. There was nobody Black in the shop. They were like, oh, we can do all kinds of hair. I came out, this was like the mid 80s, so I came out looking like I was Crystal on Dynasty. So, so that's the way you need to treat. This is the way you need to treat it. You need to ask the questions that you would ask when you were looking for a hairdresser. Can you do black hair? Can you do natural? Do you do braids? Do you do locks? Do you do relaxers? What do you do? How many black heads have you done this month? So we need to approach it like that. Many of us would love to have a Black therapist, but fact is there aren't enough of us to go around. I mean, I have to believe your caseloads are full and there's a waiting list.
Mm-hmm.
So what you want is a culturally competent therapist. And whether they be Black or culturally competent, these are the questions that you have. And if their chairs are empty, there's a reason their chairs are empty, and you should run the other way. Right? Okay, I mean, that's how we have to approach it. The other thing we have to understand, okay, is that the first therapist you choose may not be a good fit for you. And that's okay. Okay, you might find, somebody who can do black hair, but they take 5 hours to do it, and you only have 2. So that's not a good fit. So if they're not a good fit, it's okay. You can say, you know what? I appreciate what you're doing, but this isn't working. I think I need someone else. And you can even ask for a referral.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can do those types of things. And the third thing I would say is money should never deter you from finding a therapist. Okay. So if you are in a town or a city where there is a university, odds are that university has a department where they're training people to be therapists.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they have a clinic. And so you can be seen at a clinic at a university, a training clinic at a university, because you just don't become a therapist by reading a book. You have to actually practice. You have to go out there and work with clients. So you can be seen at a training clinic. And a training clinic either has a sliding scale fee, so that means that the fee is based on your income, or that they will see you for free. So money should not deter any Black woman, regardless of your age, from being able to receive good state-of-the-art treatment for anxiety.
I like that perspective of looking at it like a hairstylist. I've never heard that. I usually hear people say treat it like dating, but the hairstylist one makes so much more sense. So I'm definitely still in that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I mean, how many times have you traded hairdressers? Because because for a while they may be working and they get a little, then something happens and they, they're not as good as they were before and it's not working for you.
Yeah.
And so same question, but it's basically the same set of questions. It's the same set of questions. Can you work with me as a Black woman?
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand anxiety from a Black perspective?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing I forgot to say, that anxiety, not only does it manifest itself differently, as I talked about with the witch riding, but for Black women, anxiety is more intense. Okay, so the symptoms are more intense, and we tend to have experienced the anxiety for longer periods of time.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Angela, for being a guest today. I think that a lot of times, especially academia, we don't have Black women, Black folk in general doing this research. So the fact that you are actually doing the research and you're doing the work literally daily to like help us progress and really understand what's going on with us. Like it's never ever broken down like this to us. Like you just said, we don't get to say, like this, so what? We don't get to say that a lot of times. So thank you so much.
You are welcome.
Dr. Angela, we want to wrap up and ask if you have any takeaways for our listeners.
I think the takeaway would be there is no sin and there is no shame in being anxious. The sin and the shame come when we know we are anxious and we try to hide it. And, simply ask for help, because you would be surprised as to how many people are willing to help you around anxiety and fear.
Yes. Well, thank you, Dr. Angela, for joining us today. And I am beyond grateful that you joined us. Like I said, I remember when my mom bought this book when I was a kid, and now it's like coming full circle as an adult to be able to talk to you.
But again, please tell your mother hello for me. And and I am honored that not only full circle, but passing down to the next generation.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Take care, ladies.
You too. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye. Bye. I hope y'all enjoyed that episode. So July is Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. And I'm really thankful that, we had Dr. Angela on to particularly discuss Black women's experience with anxiety. It shows up a lot. One thing that someone told me about a quick go-to if you are feeling anxious is to use what you got, which is your hands. So one hand over heart, one hand over your stomach, and breathe in. So if I could give like a go-to like coping skill when struggling with anxiety, that has definitely been my go-to. Donique, you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think that oftentimes when we do find like coping skills and things that work for us, we get freaked out when they no longer work for us. So I would say to be patient with yourself and know that you are a continuous growing person. So sometimes it will change. So, maybe, taking a walk worked for you, but it's been a year and all of a sudden you're noticing that it's not. Then, you stop doing that and you try something else, and it's okay. It doesn't mean that nothing else is going to work. It just means that you're growing and you may need a new change, a new skill.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, that most definitely is something I feel like that happens for me a lot. I feel like the things that I need to do to help with my anxiety, it changes. And it also depends on like what the anxiety is coming from, right? So sometimes the anxiety may be from like grief, right? And then sometimes it could be from literally just having assignment or having something come up. And so then the skills will be different of like what'll help me feel better. But I think this whole episode and everything Dr. Angela is talking about is just kind of like normalizing that Black women experience anxiety, like period. Like you get to talk about it, you get to use the word anxiety, you get to say this is what's happening to me. And the more we have these conversations, the more familiarized we become with it, and we can continue helping each other. So yeah, this one hit home, y'all.
Yeah, most definitely. And in honor of Minority Mental Health Awareness Month, I want to challenge y'all to seek out support, whether it be, in a group therapy setting, whether it be in an individual therapy setting, my bad, I'm tongue tied, whether it be with another person, but I really want to challenge y'all to do that. And to wrap up, check out our book. We do have a bunch of different tools in there also. And we do have our mugs, which we invite you to use, because tea is also a very helpful coping strategy, or drinking water. So thank y'all for tuning into this week's episode of Black Women Healing Podcast.